Not hearing you, Alec.
Just plugged in the mic. How's that?
All right. Sounds better.
There you go. Good. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Is that a new background? Pat, are you broadcasting from somewhere new?
I'm in a hotel room in Appleton, Wisconsin.
Oh, Appleton. That's one happening place.
Yes, indeed.
Who did you piss off to have to be there?
I flew here, so I got to fly today. So
okay.
Pretty day for flying.
All right. I gotta. Good. How are you doing, Chris? Doing all right?
I'm doing pretty good.
I mean, sorry we're late, everyone. For those of you out there, gosh, we already got a nice little crew out there. We Jeff Fagan, our DP, and I took off. I don't know when it was, about 8:30. We took off to go get bedding for the bunnies litter box, and which we had to hit PetSmart before 9, and then we went to Freddy's. Do you guys have You have Freddy's up there, don't you, Chris?
I have not heard of a place called Freddy's.
Oh, okay. It's like Steak and Shake or Shake Shack or
Okay.
it's they serve burger, steak burgers, and they call them steak burgers. It doesn't look anything like a steak, but the Freddy's are very thin.
Doesn't look anything like ham either.
Yeah. And then and frozen custard. That's the other big thing, frozen custard. So we went out, and there were like 12 cars in line. So it took us forever to get through there. And then we're rushing home, and we got home with like 5 minutes. And so I'm shoving the burger in, and the French fries are amazing at Freddy's. And here we go. Here's Freddy's steak burger.
Freddy's steak burger. Okay.
So So I want to do that. So So that was it. And oh my God, we shot yesterday, and today was camera test day at Aries Studios. So we got some good footage. I posted some of the screenshots on the Axanar Facebook page in case anyone's interested. So this is the new red Komodo camera, which is, of course, red cameras are very, very well known, highly respected cinema cameras. They finally came out with a $7,000 camera as opposed to their $35,000 cameras. And this $7,000 camera is meant to compete with Blackmagic. So Blackmagic kept moving up the scale. Red decided to drop down and do something. So their camera, it's the first cinema camera with autofocus. And as well as just being tiny. It's like, you know what it looks like? It looks like a Hasselblad camera from that Apollo 11 was using. I mean, that's basically the size of it. It's crazy. You got to put the lens and the battery packs on, but it was so small. It was crazy. So the images look amazing. So we're going to be using that on our shoot here in October and our shoot in LA. So so that's a little Axanar update for you.
That's cool.
Yeah, what's been happening out in the real world up there, Chris, up in Ohio? Anything?
Just plugging away, working. I was talking to Pat earlier today, and it was commenting that I was looking for something in one of my notebooks, and I just couldn't find it. I'm positive I had written this thing down somewhere, and I spent about half a page sort of planning some stuff out. Spent 3 hours looking for it. Couldn't find it. Driving me nuts. So Buddy's been asleep for the last 2 hours just to make sure that he would be awake. Come on, Buddy.
Of course. Aw. Oh, good. Good. Well, all right. So where did we finish our conversation of Nemesis last week, or is this Nemesis Part 2?
Well, we probably need to go back and do Nemesis. Somebody suggested that if we just turn off the audio, we can probably get stuff by the YouTube filters.
Yes.
And I noticed when I went back and rewatched it earlier tonight that all the places where it dropped out, it was still there. So I mean, they did record it and they did put it in eventually. But I think we can probably, and I've discovered a couple of nifty things. There's a transcript function in YouTube that if you turn the transcript thing, it's always on. But I mean, if you make it visible, you can then go to specific parts of the transcript and watch that video. So I think Pat and I are going to sort of sit down and do some specific targeted research on those Nemesis videos and come up with a little bit better, more structured approach to some of the nifty things about it. But that's probably a week or two out, I would say.
Well, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. Have you guys gotten your blueprints yet? Chris, I shipped yours out.
Yes, I got them yesterday. They're currently sitting in the decontamination bin. But I haven't opened them up and looked at them yet.
Oh, you haven't? Okay. Well, here I can. Here's a.
Oh yeah, those are beautiful.
Very nice.
There's a. I mean, honestly, it's as good as anything you get. Any official Star Trek product. The similar, Star Trek product here. They're really spectacular. And of course, as with all blueprints, it's fun to look at them and go, oh, well, what's this? And crew quarters and of course this is the sheet. So this is deck 5. Mm-hmm. Deck 5 is one. I pull it close there. Let's see if it will focus. No, maybe not. Mm-hmm. You'll see the top one is it says Aroma Cafe, which is an homage to Richard Hatch, because that is the name of the little coffee shop down the street from where Richard lived and where I lived, right next to the little theater where we used to have class all the time. So it was Richard's favorite. It was Richard's favorite place. It was the place in the valley for all. You walk in there and everyone's an actor or a screenwriter or something or other. It was the place to be seen and the place to have your meetings and all. So Richard and I were there all the time, and so we did that as a little homage to him. But anyway, if you don't have a set of and then we have the what else do we got in here? Oh, and then we also did the 11 by 17 inch version of the MSD. Mm-hmm. For the Aries. So that's all in the Aries Studio store now. So you guys can all go and buy it. If you didn't donate in the Kickstarter, you can buy a set there. And we're working. We just submitted our next Kickstarter, which is the MSDs for all the other ships in the fleet. So it's the Triton class, Magellan, Korolev. There's two views, the side and the top of the Korolev. The top of the Aries, the top view of the Aries, which we haven't released before, and the Capella class, which is the frigate that Ken Burnside developed for Squadron Strike, and we incorporated that into the universe. And I thought, it's fun when people develop stuff, and then you can make it part of your universe. It's fun. It's because we all get to create. Right, we all get to create and add to the Axanar universe. Just kind of. I mean, Chris, you and I have talked so many times about the way things should be happening in the battles and this and that. So, it's bringing people together to add to your. Yeah, it's kind of like what David Weber does with you guys, right? The same exact thing. It's fun because then it's not just you. Then it's everyone else, and everyone's sharing and enjoying and contributing, and everyone's. It's just. I don't know. I think it's a whole lot more fun than just doing everything yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
Which you can't do. I mean, I can't do those blue. That's all Alexander Richardson's work. He's freaking brilliant.
Yeah. One of the things that I tell people at science fiction conventions is that when I first started going to sea, when I worked for the Center for Naval Analysis, I always talk about how I used to carry 2 notebooks with me. One of those notebooks was so that I could collect data on whatever I was doing for that particular exercise. But the other notebook was just so that I could write down cool shit to tell people about when I got ashore. And so I've got, and cool shit included things like how the color of the floor tile changes based upon what kind of space you're in.
Really?
Yeah. Like some spaces have blue tiles and some have white tiles and things like that. And so it changes so basically there's lots of little subtle visual cues. The idea being that if you're there and the lights have gone out and you can't see very well, you've just got a flashlight, that you've got some situational awareness, like you can shine your light on the floor and have kind of an idea of what kind of space you're in and hence where you might be on the ship. One of the things that I remember seeing aboard USS O'Kane was a crewman wearing a blindfold practicing egress from the ship. Because one of the things they do, you report aboard, and then after a certain amount of time, and he was with somebody else, and he had to get from his bunk out on deck blindfolded.
Very cool.
And everybody else saw what he was doing, because they'd all done it too, and they all got out of his way, right? But you had to be able to do that in order to get an up check, and there was some other sailor there, sort of just watching him to make sure he didn't like trip and fall down an open hatchway or something. But
and for those of you who've just joined us, I'm seeing some of you in the comments who I haven't seen before, and welcome. Thanks for coming out. We talk a lot. Well, Chris talks a lot about modern naval ships and modern naval combat and all, and because it's a touch point for how we then talk about space combat and all. What you're just saying also, there's so many great things, but I assume I'm sure we've talked about it in the past, but you have all seen Ice Station Zebra.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I haven't even read the book.
Oh, yeah, the book. Yeah, I read the book after I saw the movie, because I saw the movie as a kid and didn't know it was a book. And then, in my 20s, early 20s, was like, it was a book? Oh. And then read the book, which was awesome as well. But the movie was just awesome. It was such a great movie. And I think it was also, when you're young, I think that the thing I remember about it was no one won.
Yeah.
I was like, no one won. I was like, oh, that's different. I think that's interesting. Jeff and I were just talking about, he happened to talk about how he had something from had an autographed cast photo from Sequest that his father had gotten him. And I said, yeah, I just saw 2010 again this week and just remembered what an awesome actor Roy Scheider was.
Yeah.
He really was a great actor. He's so good in that movie.
And that is a great movie. Really enjoyed that movie.
Yeah. And so I confess my heresy. I like 2010 way better than 2001.
So do I.
Well, yeah.
So do I.
And
it's hard.
It was actually sort of surprising to me. I remember this weird sense when I realized that I really don't like 2001. I mean, the visuals are fantastic.
It's a beautiful movie.
It is a beautiful movie, and it's got a beautiful soundtrack, and it's got that just sort of snappy, moves right along, Stanley Kubrick pacing. Oh my God. And it's like
the problem with 2001. There's so many problems with 2001 for those of us who aren't viewing it as an art movie, because Stanley Kubrick is brilliant, right? But we don't always want to go to a movie to see how brilliant you are, right? I mean, if I'm looking at Kubrick movies, Paths of Glory is a much more impactful movie to me than 2001. If you're just talking Kubrick.
But Paths of Glory, Stanley Kubrick wasn't yet Stanley Kubrick.
That's true. Yes.
And so it was like his first movie as a director. He had no control over anything. He did what he was told.
Yeah.
And it's a better movie because of it. Now, Kubrick is great for ambiance. Like, I bought a copy of Eyes Wide Shut just for the scene when they're going through the mansion and sort of the lighting. I mean, the lighting in his movies is always pitch perfect. Well, pitch about light. It's always perfect,
right,
for what he's trying to accomplish in the scene, and just sort of like walking through this aristocratic. I mean, that scene was why I bought a copy of the movie, just so that I would have that scene for. I collect ambiance pieces.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, I think mostly because I think that this is like, like at some point it's like, it'd be neat to be able to recreate the feel of that in something else, right?
Right.
So it's reference work. So it was really good.
And I think also 2001 played so much better. Certainly the first, let's say 2/3 of the movie plays so much better back in the late 1960s, when space travel was brand new, right? And we didn't have sophisticated visions of science fiction of space travel. I mean, because you think about 2001 versus all the science fiction that comes before. There is nothing that's within 15 years of meaning. I mean, look at the stuff coming out in the mid 60s science fiction, and the view of the space. And then you come out with 2001, and 2001 is a vision of the future that today still holds up.
Yes.
Like today, everything he'd shot, the space wheel, the Pan Am space clipper, the moon bus, the Orion, the moon base, the spacesuits, everything, Discovery, everything that happens on Discovery, everything you could come out within a movie today and you'd be like, okay, I get it. It looks great.
Yeah.
Which is so unheard of, especially when you look at everything that came out in the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s. And you go, it's all dated. And Kubrick had this timeless vision, and a lot of it also has to do with his production designers and everything. And that was something I think that was so spectacular about 2001 was the vision of the future. It really was an awe-inspiring vision of what space travel could be. It was an optimistic view of what our future was in space.
Mm-hmm. And it even had an iPad.
Yeah.
It's so much. So I think that's where that movie, that's why I think the first, 2/3 of that movie are just brilliant. But the interesting thing about 2010 also is in 2008 and 10, they explain why Hal went crazy.
Yeah.
In 2001. Well, shouldn't we find that out in 2001? Right? Shouldn't we have a little better understanding? And granted, I have not gone back and watched 2001 lately.
I don't think it's in there. I mean, but by that I mean I think that explanation was made up for 2010.
I think so too. Yeah.
And so I've read the book 2001 back in high school, which was a long time ago now. So I don't quite remember whether there was anything in there.
Let me see.
I just can't remember.
Yeah, I'm going to pull down some 2001 pieces here. This is a hard book to get, but this is a great book. 2001, The Lost Science.
Okay.
Which really, it's just like photos and drawings and everything of 2001. If you can get it, you're a 2001 fan. That book is awesome. And then I have the Steel book of 2001, which I have not watched. But it's because, I don't know, I saw it as a kid. The ending was just, I mean, I understand the ending now, right? But as a kid, I didn't get I was like, what the fuck was that? Before I ever said fuck, I was 8 years old. So,
yeah.
But I don't know, Pat, how old were you when you first saw 2001?
I think I remember being in maybe 5th or 6th grade. I think I was at my friend Dan Schmiedler's house in Kansas City. And me and him watched it. And,
on TV or on videotape? Or
no, it's possible it was on a VCR. As a matter of fact, it's probably likely. Probably went to Peaches Records and rented a tape and watched it, I suspect. But so it would have been 80, 81, something like that.
Okay.
So,
I saw it at probably about the same age, but I have this dim recollection of walking by the River Hills Theater in Des Moines. I see my brother's on. Delon remembers the old River Hills. That's where all the Star Wars movies always came out at River Hills, because it was the big screen in town with the wide angle camera, wide angle projector and stuff. I have this dim recollection of my mother and I walking by there and me seeing the poster. So either it was playing at the time or it had recently played and they were doing something showing old posters or something. But I mean, I remember, and I would have been like 4.
Wow.
Yeah, but the thing is, I keyed in on spaceships when I was very, very young. It's funny. I've made the comment that when it comes to a bunch of things, my dad and I are the same person, only the nouns are different. Because his nouns are, my nouns are science fiction and books. His nouns are cowboy movies and plants. So my behavior in a bookstore and his behavior in a garden center are about the same. So, but I remember being like, I was a fan of 2001 way before I had ever seen it, just because it had cool spaceships.
Yeah, no, it was cool. Let's see. What else should I say? Kubrick got lucky, or did he ask some cosmologists and astrophysicists look at even horizon scene from Interstellar? Yeah, Kubrick might have tried to do it with no CGI. Listen, the visual effects of 2001 hold up to this day.
Yeah,
they're spectacular. I mean, which is insane. It's a 50-year-old movie.
Yeah, 50, yeah.
It's how. That's what, in my mind, that's the genius of 2001. It's not the story. The story doesn't do it for me. I think the story is so subtle in so many ways. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to appreciate it. But I think the beauty of 2001 is the vision of the future that holds up. It is that magnificent production design. It is the spectacular special effects that work to this day. It's all these different things that the visuals that are so strong. 2010 is a totally different movie. It is like Alien and Aliens, right?
Yeah.
Alien is horror. Aliens is action, science fiction, action, adventure. 2 totally different movies. 2001, 2010 are the same way. And I could watch 2010 over and over and over and enjoy something different. I mean, like watching it this past week, I was like mesmerized by Helen Mirren. I was like, oh my God, this is Helen Mirren's first starring role. Like, and she was so fucking good.
Yeah, she was wonderful. And one of the things I also liked about it, and this apparently came directly from Arthur C. Clarke, every one of the Russians was named after a Russian dissident.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all of their last names were the names of Russian dissidents, and the space drive that the Leonov used. Now, Leonov, of course, was a Russian astronaut, but the space drive it used was the Sakharov drive.
The what drive?
Sakharov drive.
Interesting.
Okay. And Andrei Sakharov was the father of the Soviet H-bomb, but then later became a dissident. And, when I was in high school, there was lots of, he was constantly in the news because he was too big a deal for the Russians to go after him in sort of the way that Putin goes after people these days. But he was, he was like under internal exile and things like that. So, a lot of the thing about a lot of those special effects is, the difference between CGI, what you see in CGI and you see in the real world is cost to do something and what you show and what you don't. I mean, if you think about it, none of the stuff that he showed, I mean, he didn't show the rocket taking off. He didn't show any of that stuff, right? The stuff that he showed was the stuff that was easy to do with models.
Yes.
Which is not to say, I don't mean that as a criticism. It means that he's a skilled craftsman and he knew how to get the best bang for his buck. And part of that was to not try to do, all the cheesy stuff that they did in Flash Gordon serials. where they have some sort of gas thing blowing gas out the end, and then so the flame would curl up.
Right.
It's like, dudes, rotate it 90 degrees.
Yeah.
Do it that way.
Yeah.
It always amazed me that nobody really seemed to understand the idea that you need to rotate that 90 degrees.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. In 2010 also, I mean, you think about it, but it had John Lithgow and Bob Balaban. I mean, Roy Scheider, of course. Even the amazing thing, Dana L. Carr was playing the Russian, and he did such a good job. He was fully convincing. It was really interesting. By the way, a great piece is at one point there's a Time magazine about will there be war or whatever, and it's the Russian premier and the American president, and it is Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke.
You know where else Arthur C. Clarke shows up?
Remind me. I just was reading all this trivia, and it was.
So there's a scene where they're having a conversation on a park bench outside the White House.
Oh, right, yes.
And the other park bench, there was an old guy feeding pigeons.
That was Arthur C. Clarke. Yeah.
And there was a great line. One of my favorite movie lines comes from that movie. During the scene towards the end where they're exchanging messages back and forth, Haywood Floyd's exchanging messages with his boss back and forth. And the boss says, the president went on TV last night to give a speech. He evoked Lincoln. You know that the president's going to get us into trouble when they start quoting Lincoln.
Oh, yeah. No,
that was fantastic.
Also, there was some other great trivia. I think the way Arthur C. Clarke wrote the ending was he wrote the ending message from Hal was all these worlds are yours except Io, attempt no landings there. The movie added the last line, use them together, use them in peace. That was not Arthur C. Clarke's writing. That was the movie.
And I think wasn't Europa in the
Europa. I'm sorry, I said Io. Europa.
So in 2001, all that stuff happens around Saturn.
Right. Is it Saturn?
Okay, the movie 2001 took place at Jupiter. The novel 2001 took place around Saturn.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I think that the novel 2010 was around Jupiter. I think he retconned it back to Jupiter.
Oh, interesting. I was okay. That's interesting. I was just telling Jeff. We were just talking about as we were talking about 2010. I said I remember the movie theater I saw it in. It was my childhood movie theater in Scarsdale, New York, the Duplex. That was a big deal. And I'll never forget it because I was watching it with my best friend George, who always used to joke that he took me to all the science fiction movies to explain them to him, right? And so we were watching it together. Anyway, there was this a couple people behind us, and I don't remember who they were or what they were. If they were guys, it was a guy and I don't remember if it was two guys chatting or whatever, and chatting through the whole movie, like the whole movie they were talking. It was just one of those things where you're so annoyed, but you don't want to say anything, right? Yeah. But it's so freaking annoying. And so finally, there's the big scene at the end, and Lithgow is looking through the Spock scope. And he goes, my God, it's shrinking because Jupiter is contracting, right?
Yeah.
And the idiot behind me says, sinking? It's sinking? And I just turned around and go, it's shrinking, and sat back down. Had just reached my limit with the nonstop talk during the course of the movie. So I'll never forget that. And that's 1980. When did that movie come out?
It came out in
83? 2010?
Oh, yeah.
Early.
Okay.
Some sort of...
Someone IMDb that. Yeah, correct, Jim Westbrook. It was Europa. That was my bad. And that was the
1984.
84. Okay, that was the other great thing about 2010. I thought I thought Floyd's closing monologue was really good. His letter back to his son, right? His letter to his son. I thought it was really good. It was really touching, and I think it worked well, humanizing the enormity of what was happening in that movie.
Yeah, it was a good movie. I really liked it.
Yeah, so we're going to encourage you guys. There's no space battles in it, so it's kind of, but nonetheless, it's a good movie worth seeing. All right, let's call up another. Is there another science fiction movie that we can rave about at this point that we haven't talked about? Pat, you haven't said much today. Come on.
No, I guess what we had talked about, I had put together some stuff on the different types of Star Trek Starship Combat games.
Oh, yes, you mentioned that last week. Okay, let's roll with that.
So if we got that, I can.
Yes. You have another one of your amazing PowerPoints?
Yeah, Chris is going to bring it up.
All right. Hold on a second. Let me bring it up. Let's see. I need to move things around so that when I start serving it, I don't lose the ability to do StreamYard stuff. So it'll take just a moment here. So
I'll just kind of start talking about it a little bit. So obviously, there's several different Star Trek games. I won't. I obviously am not going to talk about every single Star Trek game because that would take way too long, and unfortunately, I can't go into a ton of detail. But I'm going to go into a little detail on a few select ones. Like one of the first longest lasting game is actually, let me talk about. Some of the games use hex-based movement. Some use little templates where you move around on the map, but you don't have hexes. And then you use rulers or templates of some sort to move ships around. So they all use some slightly different mechanics and stuff like that. Some of the games use power allocation, where your ship, your warp engines, your impulse engines, your auxiliary power, your batteries all produce a certain amount of power. And then you end up allocating that power to, movement and shields and electronic warfare and arming your weapons, all that kind of stuff. And then there's some simpler games where you don't really get into that level of detail. So, and then one of the other distinctions about some of the games is some of the games go into the detail of, having shields on different sides, like we talked about a few episodes ago. And then some of the games just have, you have shields, and that's just assumed to protect you 360 degrees all the way around. And then one of the games we'll talk about, which is Ken Burnside's Squadron Strike game, that actually moves you in 3 dimensions and stuff. So, but no particular one game can focus and be wonderful and excellent at everything. Otherwise, you'd be bogged down and you'd need the whole staff just to play a little game. So, or a computer. And then some spaceship combat games, they have specific firing arc. The weapon fires forward or off to the side or through the backside or something like that. And then some games don't really go too deeply into the directions that the weapons can fire. So, but all of those things influence how important maneuvering is, and maneuvering into the right position to score your kill is. So
Alec, you should be able to serve it now. There we go.
Oh, okay. All right. So I didn't have quite enough time here in the hotel to make it too flashy and pretty. So, but all right, go ahead. Next slide. So a couple of the Star Trek inspired games. There's Starfleet Battles from 1979. Pretty much lasted the test of time, but their license only covered parts of the old series type stuff, right? So in some ways, you can kind of think of their history as an alternate timeline. But we'll get into more detail about that. Then there's the FASA Starship Tactical Combat Simulator. It started as the Star Trek III Combat Simulator in 1984, and then they came out with another version that updated a little bit. So I was a kid when I was playing this, 7th, 8th grade, I think, and I really loved the game. Then in about 2005 or 6 came Federation Commander. Now this has been my favorite game for a really, really long time. It's It's just a nice streamlined game, really sleek, and just generally lots of fun to play. So then, like I said, there's Ken Burnside's Squadron Strike. The next one is Star Trek Attack Wing. They basically took a lot of the game system elements from the X-Wing Starfighter combat game that came out a few years ago, and just ported it over into Star Trek. So it still, in many ways, feels like a fighter combat game, only you're moving starships around. And then there's the game I've referred to a few times as Starfleet Tactical. Obviously, namesake for this, but and that's just been my own little homebrew game that my friends and I have been playing, and we just used Star Trek ships for it to develop the game. All right, next slide.
So if I can jump in here for 2 seconds, while I'm finding my cursor so that I can move it over and go to the next slide. That is not a complete list. That doesn't include every Star Trek game ever done. It's focused primarily on tactical type games, but it's not even a complete list of all the tactical games. And it doesn't include any computer games, although I believe that's, as Pat may mention, Starfleet Battles got used on the computer, got moved onto the computer at some point. So that's a subset of the wide world. If you include strategic level games and computer games and some of the other tactical ones like the Red Alert disc game that was put out, and there's Starfleet Battle Manual and a few other things, odds and ends here and there. When you add all that stuff up, it gets pretty big pretty fast. So that's probably maybe a third to a quarter of the total number of Star Trek games that are out there.
Yep.
Back to you, Pat.
Okay, so this is Starfleet Battles. So again, 1979. So things are in black and white. It doesn't have sort of that gloss that we would kind of expect from a game now. You see that binder up there? That's the 3-inch binder that holds the rules. So it's a detailed game. I mean, you know, some of that is some fluff and scenarios and stuff like that, but that's the game. And one of the unique features this game has is your ships can move around at a speed of about 30 per turn, or up to if you dump all of your power into movement. And what they do is they've got a system. They've got a system whereby you move 1 hex at a time. So the movement is very incremental, and one hex, plus or minus 1 hex, can really make a difference in how accurate your weapons or how effective your weapons are and stuff. And if you look on the right side of the screen there, that sheet there is all the charts and tables for all the different weapons. So lots of charts and tables, lots of forms, that kind of stuff. But it still produced a really, really tactically rich game. Next slide. So pros and cons of Starfleet Battle. So one, great game, really tactically interesting. It's internally consistent. I mean, they really thought through a lot of the stuff, and a lot of things they did. You know, they just extrapolated like, hey, what would be some things that make sense that from what we saw in Star Trek, and we can extrapolate some of those out to create tactics and stuff. You know, if you have things like, you know, putting antimatter bombs on shuttles and flying the shuttle at somebody. They have transporter bombs, because why wouldn't you beam bombs out in front of somebody if you could? You know, you got boarding parties. There's all sorts of maneuvering tactics, you know. The tactic we very frequently see in the movies, hit the brakes and they'll fly right by. You know, you've got an emergency deceleration tactic, and there's numerous tactics throughout the game. So, and of course, you don't have to play with all the rules, but it's mechanically fairly simple, but there are just so many rules, and how those rules interact with each other takes a long time. But it takes about 10 years to build a really, truly competent Starfleet Battles player. You got to really play a lot. But there's lots of tactics. It stands the test of time. It's great. But lots of options mean lots of rules. And by today's standards, it's not quite as flashy and glossy as a lot of games. A duel between a Klingon D7 and a Federation Constitution class cruiser could potentially take 3 or 4 hours to play it out. So if you play a fleet battle, you're looking at a major time commitment. All right, next slide. And these just go through. So what we have here is that's what a Constitution class cruiser looks like for the Federation. If you were to zoom in, a lot of those are charts and tables for its weapons, but if you were to zoom in, those would be all the different systems boxes, like the warp engines, the impulse engines, the weapons, phasers, labs, bridge, auxiliary control, shuttle bay. It's got all of that stuff on the sheet there. And then that sheet on the left is your energy allocation form. So I'm not joking when I say, sometimes you feel like you need an accounting staff and a legal staff to fly your starship. You don't need a tactical officer. You need someone who can look up and find rules. So, but again, very fun game. Next slide. Okay, next. Oh, so this is just a quick shot of half of the table of contents for the number of rules. If we could zoom in there, we could talk about, but it means what this means is there's lots of tactical options. So there's a reason why Captain Kirk was really good at what he did. He studied this rule book really hard at the academy. So, okay, next slide. So then in the 1980s, early 80s, we had the Star Trek Starship Tactical Combat Simulator come out. It was a little glossier. It had some slightly higher production values. It had big color counters. It was a hex-based game. You can see a Constitution class and a D7 and a little bird of prey up there. It had a fairly thin rule book, 50, 60 pages or something like that. And then they came out with books that had Federation fleet and Klingon fleet, Romulans, and all that sort of stuff. So it was easy, it was fun, and this is where the 4 Years' War came from FASA. And they had the full Star Trek license, which existed up to about Star Trek 3 at the time. So, and the only thing is maneuvering wasn't quite as interesting. It was a little bit, it could be a little bit simplistic sometimes, but it was still a fun game as a kid. I really enjoyed it. Next slide. And here we have and this is how they displayed the stats for the Constitution class and the various D7 cruisers and stuff too. So they have different variants and upgrades for each class of ship. And in this game, you had power. Your warp engines produced power. Your impulse engines produced power, and you allocated power to the phasers, the torpedoes, movement, and you would raise your shields and that sort of thing. And then the big thing in this game was guessing where's the other guy going to be, so I can power up those shields really strong and keep that shield facing the other person. So again, a fun but simple game. You could play a small fleet of ships and get it done in a reasonable amount of time. So it was good. And this took you all the way from the next gen, or from early years of the old series, up through the movies and everything like that. So, all right, next slide. So then in about 2005 and 2006, ADB came out with Federation Commander, and it's basically a streamlined version of Starfleet Battles. So they had better production values, and this was really my favorite game. I would go to gaming conventions to go play in tournaments and all this kind of stuff. And this is the game that I wrote the tactics manual for and all that kind of stuff. And the thing is that even though they simplified a lot of stuff and they streamlined the game a little bit, what that meant is in a reasonable amount of time, you could play a larger battle, which creates its own tactically interesting situations without a lot of rules complexity. So its only downside is it doesn't have all the rules and thus all the options of Starfleet Battles. But they had laminated cards and everything like that. You use dry erase markers with it, but it's still a hex-based game. You move counters around or miniatures. Next slide.
So, Pat.
Yeah.
Were you any good at this game?
I could usually hold my own pretty well.
So when you say hold your own, how well could you hold your own?
I did win a few of the tournaments.
which tournaments would those be?
I don't know, something like 2007 to 2011. I think.
There was an adjective associated with those tournaments, right? It was like national or something.
Yes.
So you were a big geek.
I'm a huge geek.
You were like king of the geeks.
Yes.
No,
I wrote the book.
Yeah, he not only wrote the book, but there's a reason why. There's a reason why he was the right guy to write that book. In that Pat was really, really good at this game. So
yeah, definitely one of my favorite games. Had a lot of fun with it. All right, next slide. So here's the thing, Federation Commander. It takes that same ship we saw, makes it into a half of a sheet of paper size. Those are two separate cards, basically. But again, it shows all the different systems. It's got all the shields and all that. But these are laminated cards, and so you could go through with the dry erase marker. So you could mark up your ship as you take damage, and then erase it later and use it up. But again, they streamline their movement system. The other unique feature of this is they came out with a thing called Fleet Scale. So the one on the right is basically they chopped the ship in half. So you had a little bit less to keep track of, and the idea was that you could play a larger fleet of ships and stuff. But you still had all the same decisions and stuff to make too. So it changed it a little bit, but it was still fun. Some people preferred fleet scale. Some people preferred squadron scale. Next slide. And this next one, we'll see a Klingon battle cruiser. And you can see what a Klingon battle cruiser, a D7, looks like, and in both squadron scale and fleet scale in the half size there. So
very cool.
Yeah. All right. Next slide. So
and that seems to be, and Pat, if I could just, so that seems to be something that, like, that, for example, now with the Star Wars X-Wing game, they have two sizes of the game.
No, I don't think they have that game divvied up.
I'm pretty sure they do. I'm pretty sure they can. Because they have all the big scale ships as well.
Oh, yes. So those are two separate games.
Oh, it's two separate games. Yeah. Well, that's what I assume. Right. It's one game for individual fighters. It's another game for fleet actions.
Yeah. Yeah. The game's called Armada.
Right. Yeah.
An X-Wing, and that represents a whole squadron of X-Wings, whereas you'll have your big Star Destroyers and Montals out there and that kind of thing too.
Gotcha.
So yeah, two separate games, but both good, both fun games put out by Fantasy Flight. All right, next slide. So, and for the Starfleet Battles folks, that game, Starfleet Command Orion Pirates, that was put out by Cauldron, probably a group of several companies. But anyways, they basically took Starfleet Battles and they put it into computer form and made a phenomenal game. It's just great. And it still holds up. If you go looking for it, and I can send Chris a link so he can post it, for anyone who wants to download it and go through the whole modding process, they've got it so that it works on Windows 10 nowadays. And they've updated it a little bit with all the models and stuff. So looks great. And then there's a couple other games, and these are more fleet level games that there's Call to Armed Starfleet, put out by Mongoose Publishing initially. They did a Babylon 5 fleet level game as well.
Right.
So you wouldn't necessarily play a duel in these game systems, though Starfleet, the Call to Armed Starfleet version is a little bit better for doing that. They changed and updated some of the rules for it. And then there's a game called Starmada, and they've got some Klingon or some Federation Starfleet Universe versions for that game too. So, and those are the sort of the larger scale, very simple fleet level type games where you play the admiral, not necessarily the ship captain. Next slide.
It's worth pointing out that the Orion Pirates, Starfleet Command Orion Pirates, is a computer game, and the other two are not.
Yes.
Oh wow.
They're board games.
Orion Pirates is a computer game. It'll work on Windows 10.
Yeah, so
you get to play Starfleet Battles in real time. Okay, then there's Squadron Strike. So I just, little joke here. One of the pros for the game is that it's 3D movement. One of the cons is that it's 3D movement. But it just takes a little bit of time to learn. That's it. But Ken made great play aids for this game that help you figure out and visualize where your ship is in this 3D universe and stuff. And you can't really see it right there in the middle. There's a stand of blocks. So since it's 3D movement, there's a little green thing and there's a counter. And so, yes, that's it. And that, the counters are essentially blocks like dice. and he uses tilt blocks to show that, hey, it's 30 degrees nose up, it's 60 degrees nose up, it's standing straight up. And so you can have your ships oriented in all sorts of different ways. And then the card that you see in the middle there helps you orient your ship so that you can figure out which of your weapons can fire at that ship based on the fact that you're both like this, and yep, this one disruptor over here can hit them. So
the thing I've got to say about Squadron Strike, because it obviously has an Axanar supplement to it, is Ken Burnside is not only such a game geek and so into this game and making the game, like, he really is committed to making it a great game. But if you have any interest at all in learning Squadron Strike, you can like literally message him and he will do like a live video chat with you, or he'll go when they're doing Gen Con, they're doing demo games and stuff. He's all about teaching people the game. He loves teaching people the game. So if you have any interest in all at Squadron Strike, it's not like you got to go, oh God, I got to wade through this manual, I'm so screwed. It's like, yeah, you do, but you know what? Talk to Ken. And his enthusiasm is just amazing.
And Ken has made some really elegant designs. I mean, his most complicated game is Attack Vector Tactical, which is the first game he came out with. And it's really sort of, I always describe it as on a complexity scale of 1 to 10, it's an 11, but it plays like it's a 7.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because he's done such a great job with the play aids and thinking through the problem, et cetera, that it plays like it's less complex than it is. It's not unusual in that game for, he's counting railgun rounds that are coming out, and it's not unusual to have like 1,000 railgun rounds in flight and you're tracking them. And it sounds horrendous, but it's actually not.
Once you learn the 3D movement system for the game, and it takes a little bit of effort to do it, but it's not impossible. And I've done it. I've played these games. The rest of the game mechanics are actually quite simple. So the complication in that game is the 3D stuff. But again, he's got the play aids and stuff there to help you learn it.
And if you're interested, I mean, if both Ken's stuff and Starfleet Battles sort of fit in the category, and I don't know about Federation Commander because I've never played it, but a lot of these fit in the category of, I recommend Ken's stuff to fellow game designers. So I've told people, you need to buy a copy of this game and read through the rules and look at the play aids and stuff, because Ken is first class when it comes to doing play aids and stuff like that. But I've also told game designers, when you look at it, there's something that's gonna strike you as being weird, and it may take you a while to figure it out. And what it is that the scale is going to feel wrong to you, and that's because Ken is trying to maximize things that a lot of people would try to minimize. And it's because he's using the time scale and the distance scale to force decision making. What Pat said earlier about, you're doing this impulse movement in Starfleet Battle, so you're only moving 1 hex at a time, and you've got a chart that tells you on which of the 32 subphases of the turn you move that 1 hex. There's a lot of game designers who look at it and go, tilt, that's the wrong way to do that. I should be aggregating that stuff, not spreading it out. So it increases your decision making. It makes you think about those little pieces of tactical problem a little bit, a lot more than you would normally, because you're dealing with, you're splitting the problem into seconds as opposed to like 3 minutes, right? So a lot of this goes to the idea that when it comes to game stuff, there is no right answer. There's the answer that you as a player are interested in implementing. Some people will go, there's some people that are listening to this that are going like, that sounds fantastic, I need to get me some of that. And there's other people that are running screaming from this idea. That's perfectly normal. Back to you, Pat.
All right. Okay, next slide. So then there's this Star Trek Attack Wing. Again, it's kind of a beer and pretzels game, but it is fun. It comes out with, you got your good pre-painted miniatures there. It's a fairly easy game to learn. And building the ships and the crews is actually kind of fun. The cons for it's a little bit simplistic, but makes it a good gateway game to get into some of this stuff too. Like the shields are 360, so it doesn't matter, once the shields are down, all the shields are down. And this is where I said it plays a little bit like a fighter game, and where, for the most part, most of the weapons fire in that front arc, that front 90 degrees. There's some exceptions in there, but you can see you have those little templates to move your ships around. So you can do turns, and you use templates at the different speeds to move around. Next slide. I'll show you some examples of what they do here. So that's just a sample of a lot of the miniatures that they have, but they've got tons of miniatures. The base game's like $30 or $40, and then usually each of the little ship packs comes with a miniature, and it's got the cards to run the miniature or run that ship and stuff like that for whatever faction you use. And those usually are $10, though I suspect on eBay you could get them a little less expensive now if you want them. Next slide. So this is a Constitution class cruiser, and this is like you set up the Enterprise. So you see you've got the card for the Enterprise, and it's got its own special little capabilities. Every ship you can have a captain card for, and he comes with basically a rating. So you see Captain Kirk's rating is 9, which is the highest there is. Plus he gets 2 special abilities. Most captains only get 1. So, and then if we could zoom in on the text, which we don't need to, but we'd see that Captain Kirk would have some special ability there. And then on the Enterprise's ship card, you can see that it gets 4 crew member slots. So you could have Spock. There are cards for Scott, Montgomery Scott. You could have Uhura, Chekhov. I mean, everybody you've ever seen make even a cameo appearance in Star Trek, he has a card. So when Data took command of that Nebula class ship, and there was the lieutenant commander that was arguing with Data the entire episode, he's got a card. So I can't remember what his special ability is, but he's there.
Being annoying.
Yeah. Yep. And then you'd have a weapons slot that you can add to this ship. So in this case, chances are you'd choose the photon torpedoes, and then that shows you the different maneuver templates that ship can use. So you just kind of go through and you sort of so you work on all the different combinations of special abilities for all the characters you know and love, and it's still a fun game. Next slide. And then this is an example of Koloth's ship, the IKS Groth D7 battle cruiser. And again, they got their photon torpedoes. They've got a crew member, and then they even have cards that happen to be from the original or the animated series. Like the projected stasis field was a system that we saw in the cartoons at one point, so they got a card for that. And by the way, Starfleet Battles also includes the stuff that we saw in the cartoons there. So, that's it. So next slide. So, and then those are all the different versions of the ship. We see an Excelsior, we see an Enterprise D, Enterprise E, the Defiant, the Voyager, and all sorts of other ships. And they all certain ships have certain abilities and certain slots for modification cards and stuff like that. So it is a fun game to go play with a group of people and put 3 or 4 ships each on the board and have a nice little battle. It's fun. Next slide. So this is the one I've been working on. So friends of mine and I have been playing around with this. And basically, I just wanted a game that uses what we know about Star Trek from the last 50 years, including tech manual stuff and that kind of thing, to come up with the ships and the games. So streamlined a few processes. But of course, there's no way I'm ever going to get a Star Trek license. So I can't. It's not like I'm going online to sell this or anything. It's just my friends and I playing it. But next slide. So that's just some of the different parts and pieces for the game. Use templates to turn. You've got a little information card, and those cards are all damage cards. So as ships take damage, You can have engineering hits, fires, left warp engine, the bridge is hit, heavy weapons are hit, that kind of stuff. And then there's the little cards there on the right. And that's an Ares, by the way, and that's a D6.
Woohoo!
And those are little cards for keeping track of your ship. It uses 8-sided dice of various colors, so you don't have a bunch of charts and stuff. That little set of charts you see there is just the sequence of play. Next slide. So in this one, this is what a Constitution class heavy cruiser looks like. If you have like seven points of power on the ship, so on the right side of there, you just would fill in those little bubbles. If you fill in 7 bubbles, that means you've allocated all your power. So basically, you're just throwing power into engines, shields, weapons, that kind of stuff. And then what we did is we took things like that book, Ships of the Starfleet, and we looked at the technical specs and what kind of weapons do they have. And so these are the weapons from Ships of the Starfleet for those, and so they're all a little bit unique. So the original Constitution, Mark 10 photon torpedoes, and the 447/54 phasers. And then those show the weapon arcs and stuff like that. And then the next slide. And there we have a D7, one of the first D7. So, and it's got its various disruptors and keeps track of its power allocation and all that kind of stuff, and that sort of thing. Next slide. So, okay, you had a different font when you saved it, so I had different fonts on here, but
Okay.
So I've got my own special fonts, but they're saved on my computer. So, but anyway, I love this picture. I pulled this off of your website or something at some point. And
one of Brandon Goodyear's.
Yeah, gorgeous picture, gorgeous.
Yeah,
next slide. And so there's the D6 from, if you look in the lower right-hand corner, 2242. So it's got their little disruptors, forward disruptors, photon torpedoes, all the usual systems you'd expect. And then the next slide is the Ares. So it's got better sensors, a better shield generator, so it can regenerate its shields a little bit faster. It's got all 7 of the turrets on the top hull there. You can see those different phasers. Though I have to admit, I simply made up the phaser and the photon torpedo type in class because I didn't know what you had there. So I had to take a little artistic liberty there. And that's pretty much it. So that's just a brief intro to, and there's lots of other games out there, Starship Combat games. There's Battlefleet Gothic and, I couldn't even begin to start naming all of them. But, there's Starfighter Combat games. There's Starship Combat games. All sorts of things. So that's about all I got there. So that's there are games of varying complexity for anybody who's interested in that sort of thing, and anyone who's interested in those kind of games. There's varying levels of complexity for anybody to choose from there.
Damn. Well, listen, I'm going to encourage everyone to inundate Pat with emails if you need if you have any questions. But that's no, we need to edit this into a or redo it with just Pat Doyle's guide to Star Trek spaceship combat games. Because I think that's something. It's really useful. I mean, if I learn anything, I mean, it's that I have no time to do any of these games because they're way too complex. But like 20 years ago, I would have been all about it.
Yep. Don't get nearly as much time as I'd like anymore. But
it's like Warhammer. I haven't played Warhammer in like 3.5 years. I don't have any time, and Warhammer is way less complicated than Starship games. But I got the matter of fact, Chris, I just got the 9th edition rule book and basically looked at the pretty pictures and threw it on my shelf.
I listen to a lot of YouTube videos.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like, what is everyone?
Actually, next weekend I'm going to a little gaming convention, and Andy Chambers, I guess he wrote Battlefleet Gothic. He's one of them. So I'm going to be meeting up with some people who have worked with him on some stuff because I believe he does a game called Dropfleet Commander. And the game I'm going to go play this
okay.
weekend or next weekend is called Blood Red Skies. It's a World War II dogfighting game, but they're starting to expand into the Korean War and Vietnam and stuff. So,
very cool.
John Westbrook, what's my opinion of Star Trek Online, how it does space combat? I haven't really played Star Trek Online since it first came out about 7 or 8 years ago. I've got a lot of friends that really like it, and I got a friend that works for them and works on it. But actually, I did take part of my inspiration for how I do photon torpedoes in my game from Star Trek Online, in that photon torpedoes are more likely to be damaging to the hull of the ship once the shields are down, but they're not quite as effective when the shields are up. So, so I took that from Star Trek Online.
Gotcha. All right. Well, listen. That's awesome. I mean, you and your damn PowerPoints, you're amazing. That's good. What do we got? What do we got online for next week, boys?
So I'm certainly open to suggestions, but it occurred to me that maybe what we should do is just have a question and answer show, because we've,
Okay.
I'm a naval analyst who does war game design for the government, and Pat's a war game designer, and we're both members of Pew 9, and Pat's an airline pilot and naval reservist, and so between the two of us, we cover a lot of waterfront. We've talked about a lot of different topics, and maybe it's just time to let people send us questions, and we'll run with it.
Yep, and I'll be broadcasting. I'll be online next week from whatever hotel I'm at in Indianapolis. So I'll be there at that convention.
Awesome. Oh, okay. Well, good. Well, let's do that. We'll make it a Q&A. I'll post it and post that as a Q&A, and we'll have everyone start thinking about things that they want to ask you guys. So, well, great. Well, listen, thanks everyone again. That's another show down. Number 12, I guess it's next week's number 13. So lucky number 13 will be our Q&A show.
Although I did notice it. No, actually, this one was number 13.
Was it? Did we misnumber them?
It says.
Yeah, last week was 11. This one shows up as 11 also.
No, I think last week was 12.
Oh man, I'll have to. Let me go. Let's see.
That's a great renumbering.
Sometimes we forget.
Yeah, last week was 12.
Oh, was it? Oh, so this was 13. So let's see, 13. Oh yeah, this one says 11. That is wrong. So let's see. I'll go in and correct the numbers here, because that's really easy. Starfleet Tactical number 12 was last week, right? So this is today we are lucky number 13. Let me correct that right now. There we go. Corrected. We're that's so 13, because last week was number 12. There you go. And I'll make sure these all show up on the playlist as well. And let's see, there's 12, there's 11. Yep, and add to playlist Starfleet Tactical, wherever that is. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, listen, guys, thanks so much again. Everyone have a great week. Tomorrow's Sunday. We'll have Axanar After Dark at 10. We'll probably talk a little bit about what we shot this weekend and have some screen caps to show you guys. Probably not video, but at least some screen caps. And maybe I'll have Jeff on to just talk a little bit about the Red Komodo and what we shot this weekend. We literally shot a little vignette, which was kind of fun and cool. And the way we did it was really unique. So we were able to shoot a whole little scene in a matter of about an hour. So it was a lot of fun, but we'll talk about that tomorrow night. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. So the Q&A is episode number 14 next weekend. Yes, next weekend, episode number 14 of Starfleet Tactical will be Q&A, and I'll get something posted about that right away, so you guys can prepare. All right. Anything else, gents?
Can't think of anything.
All right. As always, gentlemen, live long and prosper. Thanks to everyone. Thank you, everyone out there, for hanging with us, and we will see you next week. Cheers, all.
Cheers.
Good night, all.